Y'all know what's going on. It's time for another episode of Doing Time with Joe. I'm your host, Joe Baker. Welcome to the show, y'all. Look here, man. Look, they are in Spain, and the wedding is beautiful. Tiffany is dressed with this long white gown that runs down her back, and then it's like runs about 5-6 feet behind her. She's got the bridesmaids, they back her, they holding it up, making sure it don't get stuck on nothing. And she's walking down, you know what I'm saying, the aisle. Her father gives her away, and Richard is waiting there. And his son is on the side, their son. And they say their adieus and they kiss, and it's a beautiful thing. He finally believes that his life has come together. He's a successful businessman for all intents and purposes. Nobody really knows what he really does. Nobody. Not even in the States. Nowhere. The only time he lives extravagantly is when he's outside of the country. And he loves being outside the country because nobody's watching. Nobody's watching. The only people that are at the wedding that know them are his friends, her parents, his mom, Javier, Eduardo, and their son. All of the other people there, they were just inviting anybody that was on the streets to enjoy this festive day with them. And people in Spain love a good party, love a good wedding. The food is fabulous. You feel me? It was catered, you know what I'm saying, by one of the local chefs, and they enjoyed all of the trappings of Spain when it comes to throwing a good wedding. The beach was beautiful that day. Everything was fine. Everybody's happy. Everybody's happy. And Javier and Richard, they stand out on the balcony of the hotel and they're talking about all of the things that they've done. And Richard tells him that, you know, it has to come a day when they walk away from him. And Javier doesn't even want to have this type of conversation because he looks at it like his dad. And you're in for life. So he says, I understand what you're saying, and at some point, I guess, you know, if you're not cut out for this life, and he said he would talk to his father because Richard had been loyal. He was just like unreasonably rich. It wasn't even about the money anymore. It was like he wanted to turn the page on this chapter in his life and just enjoy life with his family. You know, he was married now, a different level. And Eduardo maybe, hopefully would understand that. So when Javier left to go talk it over with Eduardo, because Eduardo had left and went back to his own hotel, Richard decided to take a ride. He decided to take a ride. You know, just be by himself, just to soak it all up, to, you know, just recollect about all the things that his life had, all the twists and turns anyway that his life had taken, and just to be thankful and grateful, you know? And before he spent the night with his bride, you know, he just wanted a few minutes to himself. So he went out and he had him a Porsche too. So he went out and he drove the same roads that Javier had driven that day when he was trying to find out if he was cut out for this lifestyle. And he drove it at the same speed, fast. And he was so comfortable in it as he was hugging the corners. Keep in mind, I told y'all, these streets are narrow. But he was comfortable. He was comfortable. And tragedy struck. Tragedy struck. There was a car coming from the opposite direction. And he didn't have time to hit the brakes fully. So he snatched the brake back and he turned. And when he turned to try to avoid hitting the car, the oncoming car, he hit this apartment building, crashed it. It died immediately on impact. Immediately. As the local authorities rushed to the scene and all of this and that, the news coverage was there immediately. It's almost as like they were already there, and it was on the news that night. And Tiffany was waiting for him to come back because she knew he had taken a ride, and they said, tourist in fatal car wreck. And they said they didn't know who he was. They were trying to identify him. And they put out a call over TV, said if anybody recognizes this car, please give us a call. And when she saw the car, she screamed in agony, Richard, Richard, please, it can't be. And she kept looking at the TV, glued to it. And her mother, she ran into the room and she saw on the TV exactly what Tiffany was looking at, and she was frozen. And now his mother, she walks in, and they're all just staring at the screen. And they see them pull a body out of the car, and they recognize the suit. They recognize the suit. And they put him on the gurney, and they cover him up, and they put him in the back of the ambulance, and Tiffany rushes downstairs with her family, and they're off to the police department. And when they get down to the police department, they tell them who they are and why they were there, and she still is in shock. She really can't get her words together, so her mother and Richard's mother, they take over, and they're talking to the police, and they take him down to the morgue. And when they get to the morgue, Tiffany just passes out. She passes out. She doesn't know what to do. And her parents and Richard's mother identify the body. She said she couldn't look. She didn't want to. She didn't want to see it. So when she got back to the hotel, she had to tell her son what had happened. Javier had come back to the hotel because he saw it on TV. And he was trying his best to console them. And in walks Eduardo. He was at the wedding, but he was in the back, unassuming. Nobody really noticed him. But when he came to pay his condolences, it was almost like he sucked the oxygen out of the room. This was somebody. Javier introduced him to Miss Tiffany. And Eduardo took her to the side and he told her, he said, Richard was like a son to me. Anything that you need, just ask. She knew. She knew who he was. She had never met him, but she knew. And this had come full circle for her. And she told him that she would be fine, but she was still heartbroken. So they took the first flight home. They didn't want to be there anymore. Such bad memories. But when she got back to Alabama, she opened up the safe and started going through the paperwork. And she found a tape, an audio tape. An audio tape. And it was Richard. And it had on it my last words. And she played it. And he said to her in the tape, hopefully by the time you listen to this, we would have been married for years and had a good life together. And she immediately started crying. And little Richard heard his dad's voice, and he rushed downstairs, and he stopped at the door, and he heard his mother sitting there at his father's desk listening to his voice. So he walked slowly over to her because he was afraid. He didn't understand what was going on. And when he got over there, he saw that she was listening to a tape recording. And he went on to talk about how he would be so proud of his son probably running the business now and married and with kids and grandkids, and how their lives have been so beautiful, and that he knew that from the moment that he saw her that she would be the only woman that he would want to ever spend his life with. She just broke down and started crying. And little Richard embraced her and told her, Mama, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. And she said, I don't know what I'm going to do without him. And little Richard told her, we're going to be fine. I'm going to take care of everything. And she looked at him, this 15, 16-year-old that he was, and she said, I know, baby. I know, but your daddy took care of us. We're going to be fine. We're going to be fine. And she said, I can't talk to you about it right now, but the next few days, a lot of things are going to be happening and we're going to move away. And he said, move away where? And she said, I don't know, but the next few days, a lot of changes are going to be happening. And he had prepared her, Richard had prepared her for such a day. Because something like that happens, people start clamoring to try to reorganize and restructure. And this was going to be no different. So after a couple of days of mourning and the burial and the funeral and the burial rather, Javier was there the whole time to make sure everything was fine. Making sure nobody took advantage of her. But after everything was settled, he pulled her to the side to talk in private. And he told her, look, your father, well, your husband and father to little Richard, he was getting out. He told her what was happening that night. He had wanted to talk to his father to get out. Now, of course, he's not going to tell her that Eduardo had told him no. So he tells her that Eduardo had agreed to let him walk away. It only seemed fitting that he would tell her that at this moment. And he wanted to spend some time traveling and enjoying life. And he said, I hope that you do that. I hope that you do that. He said, but we have some things that we need to take care of first. And some things I need to discuss with you. He said, your father, your husband rather, I keep saying father, y'all. Your husband was in charge of a lot of things coming in, and we need to get some paperwork so we'll know exactly who he was dealing with beyond what we know. They just wanted to make sure everything was going to continue to run. And Javier had already gotten with all 6 of Richard's friends and talked to them and told them, look, everything is going to continue to run. And he assured Miss Tiffany that she was going to continue to get her cut. But Javier was going to be taking over. But see, here's the thing. In exchange for that, he was going to need to make sure that everything continued to run through the trucking business. You see, initially, they were not using the trucking business to run their routes. But as it got bigger, Javier and Richard had decided to start using the trucking business, and it had grown exponentially to move their product up and down the highway. Now, he wanted to make sure that she was protected, so he had her switch everything into an offshore business, you know, so that she would not have any trace of it, and they paid her really well for it, so that she wouldn't have to worry about that in case something went wrong. Everybody was protected here. So everything continued to run. Everything was smooth. Nothing stopped, y'all. Because he died, nothing stopped. And after about 3 years, you know, it's time for little Richard to go off to college. And he does. And he's doing just fine. Doing just fine. And everything is great. But see, he's spending more time around Javier. He's taking these trips with his mother, meeting a lot of people. And he starts to recognize a lot of things are not as they seem. And his mother, she had told him a few things about what his father really was involved in. But when he was in his freshman year in college, he wanted to know more about what it was his father did. It was like he was bored with life. And he felt as though his father hadn't been honest with him, and he wanted to know what his father really did because he wanted to follow in his father's footsteps. So she told him. But she told him that he wouldn't have to do that. His father only did that because of the circumstances surrounding his father's business, which was little Richard's grandfather. And after he had a heart attack. He did all of that. He sacrificed all that for them so that he wouldn't have to do that. But that wasn't enough for little Richard. See, when you're young, you have these ideas about life that are sometimes not realistic. You know, see, because he saw his father. He remembers what his father did. And he saw how his father lived. And it was pretty slick. His father wasn't running up and down the highways and doing this and doing that. Other people were. And he wanted to be the boss. He wanted to be a part of that. So secretly, he had talked to Javier. And at this particular time, Javier had assumed more and more responsibilities for his father. His father was in his 80s at this particular time. And he couldn't do what he used to do. So Javier is calling the shots. He's making all of the decisions. So out of loyalty to Richard, he tells little Richard, he said, whatever you want to do. You're still getting paid. Assume the role, but you're going to have to get more involved if you want to learn the business. So he starts to learn the business. He teaches him everything that his father learned from him. And he likes it. See, he's not like his father. His father was a reluctant drug dealer. Right? He's not. He likes it. And the number one rule that his father learned and understood very well was you got to stay incognito. No. That's not sinking in with Little Richard. He doesn't see that as being necessary. What's fun about the game if don't nobody know you running it? What's fun about it? See, he saw this as funny. He saw this as something that was exciting to do, you know, all this and that, like it was really no real consequence to it because he only saw the business side of it. He wasn't out on the street corners. He wasn't the one that was picking up and dropping off. He wasn't doing that. He was the one that was sitting back counting the money. So he wanted people to know it was him. So he bought a nightclub. And when he bought this nightclub, it was back in Detroit. He wanted people to know. Now, don't get it twisted. People remembered his father, but people remembered his grandfather. But he wasn't from Detroit. He didn't grow up in Detroit. They respected him because of who his dad and his granddaddy were, but honest, hard-working people. But nah. So he had problems when he was trying to get his business off the ground down there. Even though he had money, he had a team around him, he still had problems because Detroit is a rough place. You just move back down here and you open up a club and all of this and that and think everything is going to be fine. No. He had problems. People didn't want to sell him this and sell him that. So he flexed a little bit. He started flexing to let people know who he was. And they learned real fast that he was somebody not to be played with. So they started to do business with him when they really didn't understand how far he would go in it. See, when you immature in the game and you have these ideas of what the game is about, you really don't understand how serious it can be. So you push and you push and you push. And this is what Little Richard did. This is what a lot of people out there in the streets do now. You don't fully understand the game, so you think you can rewrite the rules of the game to fit you and your personality and what you want done. But that's just not how it works. So he started making people do business with him. He started making people sell him things for less, even though he didn't have to. He had plenty of money. And his mother became worried for him. So she talked to Javier and she told Javier, get him out of it. Get him out of it before something happens. And if you want to know what happens to Little Richard, you're going to have to tune in to the next episode. This has been another episode of Doing Time with Joe. I'm your host, Joe Baker, and I say peace, y'all.